What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, February 7th, 2018, middle of the week, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and whatever insanity we're going to be dealing with this coming weekend here. So let's get into it. First of all, in our third hour today, Don Wiskin of Extendivite is going to be our on-air guest talking about his product and all the wonderful things that it will do. And in this age of very reckless corporate medical practice, going back to things with natural sources just seems like the common sense sort of thing to do. Okay, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, but because we have got so much to cover today, and we've got Don Wiskin coming in, don't call in just to hear your own voice on the radio, please. Call in if you've got something important to say, but you know, try and keep it very brief because we got a lot of stuff to go through here right now. Apparently, the House Intelligence Committee, the Senate Homeland Security Committee has released a whole bunch of documents and included is an interim report on their investigation of the Clinton email scandal and how the FBI handled it. And so I haven't had a chance to read the PDF yet. I just this second got it as the music was playing. But apparently that is now under scrutiny by the Senate committee. And it's starting to roll. It's really starting to unwind here. And, of course, as you know, we've had a second memo released from the Congress about what was going on with the dossier. And so it's, they're calling this one the Grassley memo. And apparently it's been mostly declassified at this point. And in a nutshell, Hillary wrote this dossier. She basically came up with the idea. She fed information to Christopher Steele through some of her associates, like Sid Blumenthal. He's up to his neck in this. And then paid the money to have it all written up and sort of data laundered. Like you'd launder money, you launder data so you can't trace it back to its original source. And then the FBI used this manufactured fabrication to get a warrant to spy on Trump. And everybody colluded illegally to spy on Trump. These people need to be going to prison. Now, over at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton is starting to get a little bit angry over the fact that there's all this obvious crime that was going on over at the Clinton Foundation, Hillary's campaign, Hillary at the State Department, and the government is just absolutely afraid to do anything about it. And Fitton is describing what happened here as the worst government abuse scandal in a generation, and he's absolutely right. And as I like to put it, this is the Democrats' version of Watergate. And it does represent an abuse of power, and it does delegitimize the government to see the FBI and the Department of Justice going to these extremes to illegally spy on a presidential candidate. At the same time, they are protecting somebody who's obviously been engaged in a lot of political corruption. Comey admitted in his little speech Hillary Clinton had violated several sections of Title 18. And then he says, we're not going to do anything about it. Now, Sean Hannity is out there saying that this second memo does expose the deep state corruption, and there are more memos to come. Supposedly, well, we know how much is out there. We've been studying it for years. We know how deep this well goes and how dark it's going to get. In fact, probably I would say that the people who listen to Republic Broadcasting and read whatreallyhappened.com may actually be better informed as to what's been going on inside the government than the government itself, because they're living this kind of little cloistered life, or they're surrounded by lackeys who only want them to hear happy things. Remember, we got reports that when the Nunes memo first surfaced, some of the people reading it claimed they were incredibly shocked, which that tells us they don't know what we know. All right, now, apparently Grassley is now on the warpath against the FBI. because apparently the FBI was attempting to suppress these new revelations about the Steele dossier. They're still out there trying to make this go away. It's not going to go away. The information is already out here in the independent media, and the issuance of these memos is sending a clear clarion call to all the American people that we in the independent media, we had it right. We had the real deal. Corporate media didn't, or if they did, they weren't saying it. This is the beginning of the rise of the independent media and the final collapse of the corporate media. And hopefully it's going to be the collapse of all the corruption inside our central government, so we can avoid a world war with nuclear weapons. We can avoid all kinds of bad things if we can get our government back on track towards being a republic with a democratically elected leadership that is elected in transparent, fair, and honest elections. And I know I'm asking a lot, but I'm an old guy, and I remember when our country actually ran that way, a long time before I was born. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, Jim Jordan is now confirming that Sidney Blumenthal was feeding information to Christopher Steele for the dossier. They just said, we're going to give you this money to write the dossier. Oh, and by the way, here's some information for you. They manufactured this thing from top to bottom. Now, getting on back over to Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, more of their text messages are now being released, and they confirmed two bits of information. One is that they were, in fact, using burner phones when discussing anything related to Hillary Clinton. And apparently, the texts also indicate that President Barack Obama literally wanted daily updates about the FBI's investigation into Hillary's email server, even though he had said he was not going to get involved. But he wanted daily updates. He wanted to know everything. And apparently, the FBI was being very careful about writing their daily reports to Obama. They were worried if they said the wrong thing, bad things would happen. Among the newly disclosed texts, Peter Strzok also calls Virginians who voted against then FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe's wife for a state Senate seat. He called them ignorant hillbillies. Now, that's quite revealing about how people in government feel toward the rest of us. If we don't do as we're told, if we don't do what they want, well, we're just ignorant hillbillies. I should have gotten out my 5-string banjo for that segment here, but I haven't practiced in a long time. So with these texts coming on out about Obama wanting to be briefed every single day, it brings up the old question. And again, we had one of these in Watergate. What did the president know, and when did he know it? Because Nixon tried the same defense. I had no idea the plumbers were doing those things. I didn't know anything about the break-in. And let me be perfectly clear. I accept the responsibility, but none of the blame. Tom Fitton is out there saying that the FBI and the Department of Justice have zero credibility on the Trump-Clinton investigations. Actually, at this point, they have zero credibility. We can end the sentence right there. And, of course, the defenders of the orthodoxy, the defenders of the deep state, the defenders of the system are out there saying, well, releasing all this information about what the Department of Justice and the FBI have really been doing, that's harming their image. It's destroying their credibility. No, it's the actions of the FBI and DOJ that destroyed their credibility. This idea that government can behave as just a band of blackguards and rely on good public relations to keep the people in their place, those days are gone. In the age of the internet and the independent media, government cannot maintain these cover-ups. They still try. They haven't learned that politics is perception. And people don't go to the voting booths picking their candidates on what the corporate media tells them anymore. Not like they used to. We proved that in the 2016 election. The corporate media Hillary was their darling. And they hated Trump. And they just pounded on Trump and they supported Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton still lost. And a big part of that is due to the fact that voters were reading about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton on the blogs, the websites, and listening to independent media to tell them what was really going on behind the scene. That's why the corporate media hates us so much right now. Pat Buchanan is out there saying that if Americans are losing faith in the FBI, whose fault is that? It's the FBI. The FBI did all these things. The Department of Justice did all these things. Former FBI Director James Comey got up there on TV and admitted Hillary Clinton was guilty of Title 18 felony violations and then gave her a get-out-of-jail-free card right there on air. Now, Democratic Representative Swalwell apparently admitted right on the air in a broadcast interview that the Robert Mueller investigation is the insurance policy they were talking about, the manufactured means to get rid of President Trump and put a deep state puppet darling back in that Oval Office. And at this point, I have to say I disagree with Trey Gowdy. Without that dossier, Mueller's investigation is finished, and it should be shut down. Tucker Carlson was out there talking to Adam Schiff, saying that the leaders of the witch hunt are the witches. He's right about that. Now, let's get back to Carter Page, because it's beginning to look more and more like Carter Page was a patsy, and he was set up by the FBI. Now, it came out the other day that he was an FBI undercover informant, and he helped to bring down a Russian spy ring. And then later on, the FBI used the fact that he was hanging out with this spy ring to tell the FISA court that Carter Page was a Russian spy, even though they knew that he was with that Russian spy group as an informant to bring them down. The FISA court didn't know that. They lied. The FBI lied. And they set Carter Page up, and they got the warrant, and they spied on him and everybody that he was communicating with. It's just insane, insane. Article that came out of All News Pipeline saying that at this point it's pretty obvious something huge is coming. And the narcocracy, the deep state, whatever you want to call them, they're scared. The party is coming to an end. The plot to overthrow the elected president of the United States of America is now being exposed bit by bit, and Americans are getting a real look at how the government actually operates, and it is not the way that we are taught in school or shown on television and movies. Story coming on out of Congressman Paul Gosar of Arizona is saying that all of these people, James Comey, they've committed these high crimes. Forget about jail. Some of these people could actually be looking at the death penalty. I don't think that's necessary. I think public humiliation should be sufficient. On the other hand, if there's a public outcry for mass televised hangings, who am I to disagree? The Devin Nunes FISA memo has been bolstered by Adam Schiff's admission the FISA court knew that the DNC had paid for that dossier. So that raises the question of how the FISA court was convinced to go along with this warrant, knowing that the provenance of the dossier showed a clear conflict of interest. Was the judge being arm-twisted? Blackmailed? Was there leverage being applied? And I ask that because I would have thought that by now the FISA court would have come on out and said that warrant is now invalid. It's been rescinded because it was obtained under false pretenses. But we've heard nothing about it yet. Now, back when Bill Clinton had that meeting with Loretta Lynch on the tarmac at that airport, and I said they're not talking about their grandchildren. Bill Clinton worked too hard to get close to Loretta Lynch in private circumstances. Remember, very hot day. They had the crew of the plane Everybody got off the plane except Clinton and Loretta Lynch, so they had a little bit of privacy. And I speculated at that time that's where the deal was made. Loretta Lynch was promised something. If Hillary became president, she was going to get something if she went along with all of this. And I suggested that Loretta Lynch might be offered a seat on the United States Supreme Court. Well, it turns out I wasn't far off, because QAnon is basically out there saying that, yes, Bill Clinton's offer to Loretta Lynch to basically make sure that Hillary Clinton wasn't prosecuted was that when Hillary Clinton became president, that Loretta Lynch would get Scalia's seat. Remember Justice Scalia was this conservative judge who died under very questionable circumstances? So basically, you've got to look at the timeline. February 2nd, there's a John Podesta email regarding wet work, which is slang for murder. February 13th, Scalia dies under questionable circumstance. February 13th, almost before the body is cool, Podesta email regarding Scalia replacement. June 27th, Bill Clinton meets with Loretta Lynch. July 1st, Loretta Lynch announces she will accept James Comey's saying that, well, Hillary didn't mean to do wrong, therefore we will not prosecute. And of course, a few days later, Comey dismisses the Clinton email investigation. So the timing is really looking very damaging, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe Scalia should be on the Clinton dead body list, because the timing is just too cute. And we know that people that are in the way of the Clintons, they die on a regular basis. Now, here is where things are going to heat up. Over at the Department of Justice, their Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, is going to reopen the investigation into how the FBI handled the email server case. At some point, they're going to have to go back and look at the email server itself. And at that point, I want an answer to my question. Was Hillary Clinton replaying the 1996 Chinagate scandal? Was she, while Secretary of State, selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests, using her weak email server to deliver the material, and her so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the money? Because remember, about 40% of the money in that foundation came from foreign sources, and a lot of it was for pay-for-play. There was a lot of pay-for-play going on. But there looks like there may have been an espionage operation as well. And it may have involved the Awan brothers, who were hired to do IT inside the Congress and were later found out to have broken into the computers of various congressmen. And where did all that intelligence information go, and who got paid for it? There's a big, smelly story behind all of this stuff. And there's nothing but cover-ups going on. Remember when this whole email thing blew up? Judicial Watch was trying to get the information, and the State Department came on out and said it will take 75 years to get these Clinton and Huma Abedin emails ready to make public. 75 years. Everybody's going to be dead by then. That's what it was. It was a blatant, we're going to put it off until all the involved players are dead and nobody cares anymore. It's like what they did with the John F. Kennedy files. They let a few things out, confirmed that there was, in fact, a conspiracy, but everybody who took part in it, they're already dead and gone. They got away with it. They had the lives that they bought with the blood of John F. Kennedy, and nothing happened to them. And Hillary Clinton is enjoying the wealth that her corruption produced, and nothing's going to happen to her. It is a scandal. All right, we're coming up here now on a commercial break. When we come on back, more politics, more news coming out of the Los Angeles Times, economic news, war, all kinds of stuff happening today. Stay tuned. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And again, if you would like to keep Republic Broadcasting Network on the air, and folks, we really need your help right now. We're heading into a major, major fight against corporate media and the deep state trying to get this corruption out. I've been at this for almost a quarter of a century, and it feels to me like we're finally achieving a breakthrough. So we do need your help. We wouldn't ask if we didn't need it. because we understand all of you are dealing with serious financial stresses the same that we are. So, for those of you who want to help on out, you can send a check or money order to Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you'd like to phone on in and pledge to become a recurring subscriber, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. Okay, now we're getting on back to politics and corruption here. There is something that is known as a national security letter, and if you haven't heard about it, it's easy to understand. I first heard about it back when the Clintons were in office, where somebody had issued one of these to a newspaper. And these are completely unconstitutional, but it is simply an order from the FBI or other people in the government says, you will do this. Don't ask any questions, and you're not allowed to tell anybody, or we'll just make you disappear. That's a national security letter. That's a national security letter. But apparently more and more people, individuals, institutions that are getting hit with these national security letters, which are gag orders, they're starting to go public. And they're starting to go to court and say, this is not legal. And of course, the courts are having to say, yeah, you're absolutely right. There is no legal grounds whatsoever. The FBI does not have the authority to just go on out and order people to shut up, unless they can get a judge to issue a gag order, which clearly they have not been. There's no judicial oversight. And it's another example of how abusive the FBI has become. I mean, that to me is a sign of a dictatorship right there. Oh, I've seen a crime. I want to report the crime. No, you can't. You don't say anything. I mean, that's how I got into trouble. That's how I got on this path here. I could see that there was something wrong with the official story. And, see something, say something. I'm sure you've all heard that phrase. So like a good little citizen, I tried to raise my hand and say, wait a minute, this isn't a suicide. Okay, now, as you know, corporate media is in trouble, and they did it to themselves. And I have absolutely no sympathy for them. But apparently, the current owner of the Los Angeles Times is working on a deal to sell the newspaper to a billionaire Los Angeles-based physician. He's a medical entrepreneur. And apparently, it has to do with the fact that there's been a high turnover of staff, both regular and management. And apparently, the current staff, they don't like the way the newspaper is being run. Maybe the staff is finally standing up and saying, we're tired of shoveling bovine excrement out of those newspaper vending machines because it's costing us readers and ad revenues, and we're all afraid for our jobs. But apparently, the new potential owner, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, is looking at paying $500 million for that newspaper and also for the San Diego Union Tribune. So hopefully, his being a doctor, he'll be less inclined to want to skew the political news. Of course, I'm sure the newspapers will be full of all kinds of articles about the wonders of vaccines and how you should stay away from homeopathy. But we can keep an eye out for that stuff. We mentioned, I think it was only yesterday, Newsweek is in trouble. The top staffers have been fired. Apparently, they're under investigation, or rather their parent company is under investigation by the district attorney of Manhattan for some financial stuff. And again, they did it to themselves. Back in 1995, can you believe this? Back in 1995, Newsweek ran an article on why the internet was going to fail. And say, there's nothing out there, it's not going to be popular. And what was really interesting was it was written by a guy named Clifford Stoll, who by training was an astronomer, but he'd lost his grant, and so he was managing computer servers, and he stumbled across one of the world's first major hackers. And he wrote a book about it called The Cuckoo's Nest. which details his hunt for this Marcus Hess, who was hacking U.S. computers in Germany and selling the information to the KGB. So Clifford does know about the net, but apparently he just lacked the imagination to see where media content was going to go, the World Wide Web. But Newsweek ran this in 1995, and maybe their agenda was, even back then, they didn't want the competition. In fact, Clifford Stoll in his article here says, you don't get any news on the internet. Really, you stick with the newspapers and TV. So maybe they just paid him a lot of money to try and keep Americans in their current media habits, and it didn't work. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Let's turn over to the war zones. There certainly are so many of them right now. And apparently, on the ground in Syria, there's a general, Lieutenant General Paul E. Funk, and basically he's saying that the U.S. is going to back the Kurdish fighters, which means the U.S. and Turkey are now basically on opposite sides of this issue. And, of course, Erdogan has been saying all along, Americans who are sitting in the middle of those Kurds are legitimate targets now. So I guess they're so desperate for a war, they're willing to go to war against Turkey from inside Syria, which doesn't want the U.S. forces there. It's getting really, really messed up. And apparently there is a growing strain between Turkey and Russia over the fact that all of a sudden they seem to be shooting at each other or helping the people who are shooting at each other. And a lot of this has to do with the loss of that Sukhoi 25. And apparently the pilot was one of Russia's top aces, and certainly was a very tough individual, committed suicide rather than be taken prisoner. But now they're beginning to find out where this all came from. Russia is now saying that the man-pad missile came across the border from Turkey, and they're angry because Turkey is supposed to be securing their border against that sort of things, cutting Turkey a little bit of slack. We're talking about a man-pad, something that's very, very small and easy to conceal. But apparently, all the way back in February of 2014, the Wall Street Journal ran a story that the Saudis were going to provide Syrian rebels with man-pads, and apparently the United States was paying for it all. So that's where the man-pad came from that shot down that Russian plane. Now, Erdogan is still pledging that once the Kurds are gone from Manbij, that he will turn it back over to its original Arab owners who were displaced by the Kurds. And with the Kurds gone, Turkey is saying, let them come home. This is their place again. And apparently the idea is that Turkey wants to push the Kurds, and even the U.S. is saying that, or at least the Obama administration was saying they were going to move the Kurds to the east of the Euphrates River after ISIS was pushed out. There's a problem there, and that is Iran is not agreeable to having the creation of a Kurdish state on the eastern side of the Euphrates. So the more the U.S. meddles, the more the U.S. tinkers, the worse the situation seems to get. Now, as you know, the U.S. government has once again gone back to that tired old canard that Assad is gassing his own people. And it's not a matter of people believing this claim because it's been discredited so many times before. But apparently they're reviving this and saying, oh, there's a chemical arms issue, to basically draw attention away from the fact that Syria and Russia have been very successful in ridding Syria of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, something the U.S. claimed to be doing but did not. So now they're looking for a distraction over there. And I still presume that the U.S. government is trying to figure out some way they can sell a new incursion into Syria to you, the very war-weary American people. Now, here is something that could very easily turn into a major, major problem. Syria has reported that once again Israeli warplanes have attacked Syria's military near Damascus. And as usual, the Israeli warplanes are flying over Lebanon because they know that Syria doesn't dare fire on Israeli warplanes over Lebanon because of the damage that will happen to Lebanon from either missed shots or crashing Israeli warplanes. So they just hide over there and they lob missiles. The reason this is a problem is because following the last such attack, Assad told Israel, if you attack us again, we will attack the Ben Gurion International Airport with Scud missiles. Now, so far, there's no report that Assad has done so, but it's very dangerous of Israel to try and call Assad's bluff, given that the Iron Dome isn't as effective at stopping incoming missiles as the sales brochure would have you believe. Now, turning back over to Iran, as you know, the U.S. is ratcheting up pressure. They're trying to get some way to basically force Iran to walk away from the P5+1 deal, which Iran has indicated that, yes, they will if the U.S. executes any unilateral changes, such as trying to add non-nuclear missiles to the deal, which was never part of the original deal. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is out there pointing out that if the Iran nuclear deal fails, the entire global non-proliferation system will be at risk. Well, Mr. Lavrov, I'm sorry, the global non-proliferation system has already failed because of Israel and their unaccounted for nuclear weapons and the fact that they were caught trying to sell one to South Africa. And I don't know about you, but I'm not willing to bet that Israel was only selling to South Africa. I'm sure there's a lot of other countries who wanted nuclear weapons who would be glad to pay Israel's price for a clandestine, untraceable nuclear weapon that was not being tracked by the IAEA. The reality is, we don't really know who's got nuclear weapons and who does not. North Korea might have even bought some of their first nuclear weapons from Israel. Publicly, they were enemies, but hey, when you've got a deal to get a nuke, you can be friends for a few minutes there. Apparently, Assistant Secretary of Defense Randall Schreiber, speaking to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, is estimating the cost of the Afghan war for this year to be $45 billion with a B. That's $45 billion plus all those kids are going to be killed and crippled just to make sure that the oil companies get their pipeline and the American drug lords get their opium. $45 billion. And you know what's really angering? The oil and the opium isn't worth that much money. My first thought when I heard this is, okay, well, if we've got to have Afghanistan for the oil and opium, let the oil companies and the opium drug lords pay for it all. And then I looked at some of the numbers and said, heck no, they can't, they couldn't afford to do it. That's why they bribe members of the government so that we all get to pay for their business locale. Location, location, location. It's all location. Things are changing dramatically down in Yemen. Apparently, they've been fighting in the interim capital of Aden, which was also the seat of the government for the formerly independent country of South Yemen. And apparently over the weekend, President Hadi tried to ban the Southern Transitional Council and its supporters from protesting him. But they protested anyway. Hadi ordered his soldiers to shoot at activists. And apparently the situation is where the party's armed wing, the Southern Resistance Forces, have taken over Aden in a move that Hadi's government is decried as a coup. Now, we don't know where Hadi is right now, or if he's even still alive, but it could be the end of the war. Because remember, Hadi was the installed puppet ruler. And this may be the second time that Yemen has kicked out a U.S. puppet. I'm sure the attitude in Washington, D.C. is, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Third time will be a charm. Apparently, South Yemen is in some form of control in the country because they've issued a formal protest over U.S. drone strikes that killed civilians. And the problem is the U.S. is not actually picking its targets. They're engaging in what they're calling signature strikes. They used to call them profile targeting. It's basically the same thing. If they see too many people in a car, oh, they must be militants. It satisfies the signature of a legitimate target, and they blow it up. They don't really know. They don't really know. So there was this one attack on January 28th, and apparently the people in the car were family members of a child who was missing in the Side district. They were driving on out there to mount a search party for this kid, and they were not members of any political or religious organizations, and the U.S. hit the car with a drone strike and killed all those adults, and probably that kid is either dead or dying in the desert. But the strike is consistent with U.S. policy, don't you know? Yes, those people piloting the drone, they did what they're supposed to do. Anyway, Rex Tillerson is already out there screaming that Russia is going to interfere in the elections this November. Good reason to get rid of the electronic machines and go back to paper ballots and voter ID. It's going to make it very hard for Russia or anyone else to significantly alter the outcome of the election. It's just more Russia bashing coming on out. Now, we mentioned this briefly yesterday. We're going to mention it again. Basically, less than a week after a U.S. missile defense system failed to intercept a test ballistic missile outside the atmosphere, the Chinese Ministry of National Defense succeeded in their equivalent test. Another good reason to maybe back off from all this talk about nuclear warfare. Over on the Korean Peninsula, everybody's getting ready for the start of the Winter Olympics. Apparently, more than 200 North Korean cheerleaders have now crossed over the DMZ. It's 229 cheerleaders, and apparently they're part of a 280-strong delegation. And it's basically one of the largest border crossings between the two Koreas in quite a long time. The cheerleaders were all wearing identical outfits, hats, luggage. They looked actually very impressive, and they're staying at a 4-star luxury hotel in Inje, which is about 2 hours' drive from the Olympic venue. And apparently Tuesday, Tuesday, the 140-strong North Korean orchestra arrived at the port of Mukho on the west coast of South Korea. So it's nice that they're making these moves. They're really trying to bring the Koreas back together. And what's getting in the way? The usual belligerent U.S. Mike Pence is already out there threatening North Korea with the toughest and most aggressive U.S. sanctions ahead of the Olympics. Basically saying, we're going to pound on you until you abandon your nuclear and ballistic missile programs once and for all. Okay, well, Mr. Pence, if you want to ban nuclear weapons, let's start with the country that has actually used them against the civilians of another country. North Korea has not attacked us. None of these countries that the U.S. is waging war on initiated that war. It's all started from the U.S., usually with a bunch of lies. Assad's gas, Saddam's nuclear weapons, and so forth and so on. North Korea has made it abundantly clear. They want nuclear weapons and long-range missiles to deliver them in order to live in peace, free of the risk of invasion by the United States of America. And frankly, that seems to make a lot of sense to me. That's the whole reason to have nuclear weapons and long-range missiles, to send a message to other countries. Leave us alone. We can be friends. We can do business. We can go to the Olympics and everything. Don't think about invading us and taking our wealth by force, because we will make it very expensive. That's a legitimate right every nation state has to deterrence. And every single country that the United States has arm twisted into surrendering their weapons of deterrence, usually coupled with a promise that we'll leave you alone if you give up your weapons of deterrence, then they get invaded. They did it to Libya. They did it to Iraq. They did it to Syria. Now they're probably getting ready to do it to Iran, and they're going to do it to North Korea. According to a story coming on out of Sputnik News, the U.S. has no plans to meet with any North Korean officials at the Olympics. The U.S. is going out of its way to show its hostility and its dedication to war. The Chinese are right. Our government, not just Trump, our entire government is back in that obsolete Cold War mentality. Article out of Global Research up in Canada talking about the psychological effect of all these nuclear attack warning drills, the duck and cover, and obviously they're talking about what happened here in Hawaii, where in addition to our monthly test of the tsunami warning system, we now have a monthly test of a nuclear attack warning system. And you know what happened? Somebody pushed a button. Could be the wrong button, may have been deliberate. We don't really know, but basically the warning was sent on out. Nuclear missile attack coming on in. And the word that it was a drill and not real didn't get out for 47 minutes. So on the assumption that it wasn't an accident, yeah, it's psych war. It's to get everybody really thinking that North Korea could really attack us without warning. When common sense says, no, they're not just going to throw away their nuclear deterrent for no reason. No country that has a nuclear deterrent has just hauled off and attacked another country with those weapons. Except, of course, for the United States of America. Over in Israel, Israel's military and police seem to have escalated this idea of extrajudicial execution. And apparently there was an incident where a Palestinian attacked a settler outside one of the illegal settlements and stabbed him. The police picked out a Palestinian they thought may have been the guy, and they just shot him right there. No trial, no judge, no jury. And, of course, that caused a bit of a ruckus, which resulted in another death of a Palestinian and about 50 people injured. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call here. Kevin in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. One of the things that's on my mind is the Olympics this year. I have a really bad feeling, like my spidey senses are going, danger, danger, danger. I hope, what are the chances that something's going to be pulled off here?
It's hard to say. I mean, we certainly cannot say with certainty that nothing untoward is going to happen. And we've already seen one time when South Korea, or at least the United States, tried to frame North Korea for a South Korean ship getting blown up. So it's kind of hard to say. The Olympics, unfortunately, have become politicized, and they have become a theater stage for anybody trying to make a point. We look back on the so-called Munich massacre, and we realize that it wasn't what we were all told it was, that it was, in fact, a psyop to basically demonize Palestine and help the Israel government, play victim for a little while longer.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just been on my mind the past couple of days that I just feel real uneasy and real unsettled. Like, man, something, and why not do it there and on a world stage and bring the spotlight to it, especially what's going on here with the FBI. Everybody knows they're corrupt as crap. The whole FISA thing, it would pull, an attack would pull the spotlight off of that and put it on, there, and there's your war that the United States and the powers that shouldn't be that they want. I mean, especially ahead of this economic collapse. I still, like you and your wife were saying, anytime the markets go down, it seems to speed up the war agenda. I look on all these fronts. I look at, the Korean Peninsula, then I look at Syria, I look in the Middle East. Any one of these points are flashpoints. I mean, they're all powder kegs that we're sitting on. It's just going to take one spark.
Well, one possible scenario here is that a U.S. submarine or one of her allies is just off the coast of North Korea and fires a missile into South Korea during the Olympics. And they say, oh, those dastardly North Koreans, how could they, they're trying to win the Olympics by killing all the other teams or some other such nonsense. But again, you have to ask the question, where's the motivation? It's like when they're out there saying that Assad was gassing his own people. Okay, why? What does he get from it? It's an insane thing for him to do. And the same thing with Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un does not want a war. He doesn't want to be invaded. That's why he's building the nuclear deterrent. And so if something happens, the first thing that we all have to ask is who benefits? Who gets what they want? Certainly any kind of an attack that is blamed on North Korea does not get North Korea what they want, which is to be left alone. It gets the U.S. what the U.S. wants, another war to play with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, Kevin, we're going to have to let you do station identification. So thank you very much for the phone call. We'll be back with Hour 2 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, Hour number 2. And I know I'm jumping around a little bit on the topics here, but apparently Nancy Pelosi is trying to pull off a filibuster, and she's been talking for about 6 hours now, and apparently as minority leader, she's allowed to speak for however as long as she wants. And apparently this is a reaction to the 2-year budget agreement that Congress just put on through, which gives the lion's share of the increase to the military, I might add. And of course, Pelosi is very upset that the budget didn't address the issue of immigration. So I guess she's taken it upon herself to stand up there and try and hold the Congress hostage, keep them from doing anything else until they start or pass some kind of a bill that keeps the borders open, keeps the dreamers amnestied or citizens. So she's just up there pushing this whole issue, but she's going to have to fall asleep at some point. Now, getting on back down to the international scene and Israel, we're talking about this escalation of extrajudicial assassination or execution, just summary execution in the streets of the West Bank. And as you know, Israel basically keeps a tight rein over everything going in and out of Gaza. And over the years, they've been slowly tightening the squeeze. It's basically a controlled starvation. Israel literally figures out the absolute bare minimum that the Gazans need to survive on so that they can avoid being accused of humanitarian crimes, they think. But apparently it's gotten so bad now that emergency generators, Israel basically supplies the electricity to Gaza, for which Gaza was supposed to pay for using the money that the U.S. was sending. So they're getting less and less hours of electric service every day, and hospitals are running on emergency generators. They're running out of fuel. And so 19 healthcare facilities in the Gaza Strip have had to shut down. These people are under siege. And I'm glad that Japan is recognizing the Palestinian state, and they're going to send some money. So maybe Gaza can get the lights turned on again. All right, we're going to take a quick phone call from Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show, and what is on your mind?
Well, good day, Michael. Yeah, Michael, yesterday I called you, and I didn't have maybe all my facts about Iran, and I'm sorry about that, but I know Iran's not really truly a friend of ours, so I just want to get that off my chest.
How do you know that?
But what I do want to
how do you know that, Tom? When was the last time you were in Iran?
I mean, I don't think
when was the last time you were in Iran?
Or have our best interests at heart.
When was the last time you were in Iran? When was the last time you were in Iran?
Well, I've never been to Iran. I don't think I'd ever want to go to Iran, but
okay.
I don't know how they actually feel about us. I know
that's right, you don't. Okay, goodbye. We're going to let you go. I try and be accommodating to people, but when they call on in and they clearly don't know what they're talking about, they just want to rattle off a bunch of propaganda. If Tom's never been to Iran, he doesn't know how Iran feels about the United States. He's just back out there with the propaganda that he is getting off the corporate media. So, Tom, you're banned. Please don't call in again. Getting on back to Israel, do you remember United Nations General Assembly Resolution 3379? That was the one that came on out and basically said that Zionism is a form of racism and racial discrimination, at which point Israel jumped up and said, you're a bunch of anti-Semites, you're Jew haters. And of course the U.S. said, oh, take it back, we'll stop sending money to you if you don't take it back. And the UN eventually capitulated. But I wanted to mention that as a preface to the fact that Israel has now started deportation of African migrants. Now, what is it that they're saying here in the United States when we talk about deporting migrants and especially illegal immigrants? Oh, you must be a racist. Well, if we're racist for wanting to get the illegal immigrants out of our country, then Israel is being racist, kicking out the African migrants, aren't they? Sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander. Now, here's something that is going to keep up Benjamin Netanyahu tonight. Wreck his sleep. The Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. And I can't think of anybody who deserves it more. And something else that will probably have Netanyahu throwing crockery at the wall. Israeli police chiefs are recommending that Prime Minister Netanyahu be indicted on corruption charges. So it looks like the Israeli police chiefs have more integrity than former director of the FBI, James Comey, former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, etc., ad infinitum, ad nauseum. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to take another phone call. This one from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I got to respond to Tom. Tom, what best interest does your own government have for you? Yeah, that's the question.
That's a good question.
What's the best interest of the people? What about Flint, Michigan? What best interest is to have good drinking water? You know, what's the best interest of John McCain, who's not a Democrat? He's a Republican. He's a globalist. There is no party. When are you going to understand that? It's an oligarchy. John McCain is for open borders. Lindsey Graham is for open borders. Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, the Bushes, which voted for Hillary, they're all globalists. They're for open borders. So that's not in the best interest of America. But, you know, who am I to say, you know, hey, Mike, if I had the money, I'd visit Iran. You know, mm-hmm. I'd like to buy a real Persian rug from over there. But I mean,
they're actually very expensive. They're very expensive. The real ones, because they're handmade. I'm sure there's machine-made ones now. Here's the point I wanted to make. There is a documentary out there called Please Don't Tell My Mother I'm in Iran, and it's made by an Israeli documentary filmmaker. And it shows the people of Iran, they're just like us. They just want to, you know, have a job or a business and take care of their family. And they're not running around the streets, you know, carrying knives and screaming at people about jihad. Those people are up in Europe, courtesy of the open borders. The Iranian, you know, and again, one of the reasons this is a sore subject for me is that many years ago, I've known Iranian people. They're very pleasant. And they're not really out there trying to say, you need to be our religion, you need to do this, you need to do that. Very pleasant, very polite, and, you know, very likable. And so when I hear somebody coming on in, calling on in and spouting the obvious propaganda to demonize a country that has done us no harm, I kind of lost it there, and I do apologize. It was unprofessional. But there are times when certain callers, they come on in and they admit, I really don't know what's going on, but by golly, we should do something. Okay, so Tom is banned, and I hate to do that because I do respect the First Amendment. But the First Amendment is not designed to protect lies and propaganda. It's intended to protect the truth.
I think he's right on immigration and stuff, Mike. So, I have to say, but he needs to stop watching Fox News and Sean Hannity because they're part of the propaganda also. They all got their own agenda. Tucker Carlson's probably the best thing Fox News, but he still works for Fox News, which is a corporation and not to be trusted. Mm-hmm. So, but I just don't understand the whole Russia, which Tom knows is a lie. What best interest does the United States have in lying? Like your elements of your government lying. Why can't we all just leave everybody alone? Your best interest is invading other countries and ruining their lives. They're not coming over here and doing that.
No,
we're going over there. And that's the problem I got. Tom needs to not watch Fox News anymore. And I know he don't watch CNN or MSNBC, but he just needs to, just do a little basic research on Iran and the culture and stuff. And, and by the way, all those people, the jihadists, they're all coming from Saudi Arabia or the Wahhabist type of mentality.
Yes.
They're not coming from Iran. They're not coming from North Korea. They're not coming from Syria. They're not coming from Iraq. And they're not coming from Russia. They're coming from Saudi Arabia, which the U.S. government and Britain and France is very close, and Israel is very closely linked to. So I want people to remember that. And Mike, I need you to, if you can link Ron Paul's Liberty Report. They had Vanessa Beeley on again talking about how Hillary Clinton, the Global Clinton Initiatives, linked to the Sundance, which is owned by Robert Redford, which, remember, they pushed the White Helmets. Wasn't that George Clooney Netflix production? And also Disney's linked to that. And it did, like, Al Newser Front, which is right next door, she said, to, the White Helmets.
Yes.
So it's all a propaganda NGO scam, because that's not, and by the way, that's not even a real Syrian group to help people. It's made up. That has nothing to do with the Syrian government. It's a fraudulent group.
Yeah, it's a propaganda device. It's a propaganda device.
Yeah, so if you can just maybe you can watch the video in your free time, or post it the Ron Paul Liberty Report with her on there.
Can you send me the URL? If you send me the URL, I'll put it up. Anyway, Dustin.
Okay.
All right.
We just went up yesterday or today, so.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the information. I'm going to let you go here and get on back to doing the news here. Here's an interesting little bit. As you know, Poland has just passed a law basically saying that everything that happened in Poland during World War II needs to be attributed to the Nazi occupiers, and they want to outlaw people talking about Polish concentration camps or Polish this or Polish that, which makes a lot of sense. Israel, of course, is very upset, and so is the U.S., because Israel wants everybody around the world to feel guilty for whatever it was that was supposed to happen in World War II, so that they will continue to offer up money as a form of atonement, along with political support. But so the Polish president signed this bill into law that basically makes it a crime to suggest the country was complicit in German war crimes. And, of course, Israel and the U.S. have their knickers in a twist saying, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that. But here's a question that puts us all in perspective. Had the Nazis not occupied Poland, would the Polish people have just taken it upon themselves to start rounding up Jews, gypsies, and so forth, and sending them to slave labor camps? And the answer is obviously no. Left to themselves, the Polish people wouldn't have done that. It happened under Nazi occupation. Let's put the blame where it belongs, and only where it belongs. Now, if Israel wants money for whatever it is that is supposed to have happened in World War II, I suggest they go talk to the Nazis which is easier done with a Ouija board, and stop trying to convince those of us who've been born after it was all over and done with that we are somehow obligated for what happened. Because we're not. For two reasons. One, I refuse to accept responsibility for anything that happens outside of my control. And anything that happened before I was born was definitely outside my control. Reason number two, we here in the United States of America, we're part of the people that stopped the Nazis from completing whatever it is Israel claims they were trying to do. Israel should be sending us money for all those families who lost their husbands and fathers in World War II in the European theater. Israel should be showing a lot more gratitude for our coming on in and saving their bacon. Sorry for the reference on that one. Israel actually doesn't behave like they're grateful for anything, which I think is probably one of the reasons people are beginning to suspect that, like Saddam's nuclear bombs and Assad's sarin gas, that what the Nazis are accused of doing is just more propaganda. All right, we're going to take a phone call here from Bob in Colorado. Aloha. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike, how are you? I just wanted to mention to you, you mentioned that documentary, and I saw that documentary a couple of years ago, and I used to believe the Fox News garbage and all that stuff. And when I saw the documentary, I started doing research into it, and none of those countries over there ever had a problem with Americans. They used to love to have us come to visit their country.
Yes.
We had money, they had the beauty, and it was a wonderful thing. And then when this whole thing started with Israel and the United States and Britain with wanting to go in and take over all the oil and everything else, it started bombing everybody. Well, no wonder if they have hatred against us. Well, that's the reason. It has nothing to do with the country itself. It's a beautiful country, and they have one of the oldest Jewish synagogues with Jewish people living there who love the Iranians. It would never even go back to Israel.
You're absolutely right. You know, some years ago when, before this whole thing with Ahmadinejad really got out of hand, I went out to YouTube and I just did a search for videos on daily life in Iran. And I found all these videos about the nightlife and, you know, young kids dressed like Westerners in discos and stuff, and just having a really fun time. And then we started hearing on TV about how oppressive Iran was, and it forced women to wear these hijabs and everything. And all those YouTube videos disappeared. And so even back then, YouTube was filtering what we were seeing about these other countries.
Well, even once in a while on RT News on weekends, they have special reports and stuff, and they've showed some documentaries on those countries. And I'll tell you what, man, they look better than most of our cities. I'll tell you.
No question about that.
I've been to Israel, and all I can say is about Israel, you are totally right about it is not, because I study the Bible. I've been doing it for quite a few years. Israel is not the Israel of the Bible. That is it, plain and simple.
Yes.
So anyway, Mike, I just want to let you know and let Tom know that he needs to go see that documentary about Iran, and maybe it'll show him that whatever news he's listening to is far off from what really is going on. Thanks, Mike. You have a wonderful program. Have a great day.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot, Bob. We're going to let you go here. And let's get back to the war stuff. As you know, the House earlier today passed an interim funding bill to avoid a government shutdown over the immigration issue. And then finally, the House and Senate said, really, this is just ridiculous. And they came up with this 2-year budget. The lion's share of the increase is going to the military. But again, when the math isn't working on out. Trump's military spending is going to just drive our national debt right through the roof, along with obviously lowering the taxes. And remember, it was too much military spending that brought down the Soviet Union. Now, Donald Trump has announced that he would like to have a military parade, presumably in Washington, D.C., to show America's military might. How very Soviet of him. And I'm not the only person who thinks this is a bad idea. First of all, it's going to cost millions of dollars. And after giving the lion's share of budget increases to the military, I don't think you should rub American taxpayers' noses in the fact that they're getting back less and less of their money. And the military really is. So a former State Department spokesman has come on out, John Kirby, was being interviewed on CNN's New Day, and said, a military parade is beneath us as a nation. And he's absolutely correct, because our national image isn't supposed to be one of a huge military power. We're supposed to be a leader of human rights. We're supposed to inspire other nations. And before we start handing any more money to the Defense Department, let's find out where the rest of that money's gone. We're talking trillions and trillions of dollars. They have no idea where it went. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Let's talk about the economic news here. And the stock market recovery appears to have stumbled. And the trading was very brisk, a lot of volume, and the numbers were up earlier in the day. And then starting right about the same time the Congress came to that 2-year budget deal, the market started to drop. There's a lot of buy activity. Plunge protection team shoved it up again, then a second time, then really tried to ramp it up toward the close of the market, and it fell right off the cliff again. So people are already worried. And the other day I said the recovery that we had on Tuesday following the Monday meltdown was not going to reassure people the problems were over. So the Dow, they all ended in the red, not too bad, but enough in the red where people are nervously concerned. The worst one was NASDAQ, which was off almost 1%. Now, story coming out of Zero Hedge, talking about Janet Yellen getting ready to step down from the Federal Reserve, trying to establish her legacy. But basically said, Yellen said there's less to lose sleep about now than has been true for quite some time, which obviously is a nonsensical thing to say, given what's happened these past few days. Now, the markets were due for a correction. How far it's going to go and how bad it's going to get, nobody really knows. And it's like I told you, back in 1929, there was a minor crash in August. And the markets recovered, and everybody breathed a sigh of relief and said, okay, we got through that. Everything's working just fine. And then October came along. Article coming on out of Investment Watch blog reminding us all that a lot of the stock volatility is being generated by these high-frequency trading computers. And they're running so blazingly fast, their human operators and programmers don't really understand what's going on inside them. And I remember during this bad crash we had back in the, I think it was the early 90s, it was the computer trading that just drove it out of, it just kept driving it out of stability. So that's something that needs to be looked at as well. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog again saying, is a massive stock market reversal upon us? Well, we know the markets are overvalued, and we've known that for quite some time. The whole process of speculative stock trading is all about the current price of the stock, not its underlying value. We know the plunge protection team has been shoving up that stock market because every president since Bill Clinton has been using the soaring Dow to try and claim that the economy is working. And it isn't. And you can see that just walking around our country. The hungry, the homeless, the deteriorated infrastructure. We are an empire in decline. Now, over at the Royal Bank of Scotland, you're going to love this one. They've been in so much trouble, they've had to be bailed out by the taxpayer. Whistleblowers have just announced that apparently the Royal Bank of Scotland was actually forging customer signatures, and they were training their staff how to forge customer signatures. They'd take a legitimate signature, they'd put it on a light table or up against a window, and they would trace it onto a document. Then they'd photocopy the document several times to blur it a little bit and hide the crime. These bankers are criminals. They're crooks, absolutely. Apparently, Trump is now back on board with a bill to force a full and complete audit of the Federal Reserve. Trump is saying it is time to force the Federal Reserve to operate by the same standards of transparency and accountability to the taxpayers that we should demand of all government agencies. Well, two problems with that. One, the Federal Reserve is not a government agency. It's a privately owned central bank. It has been able to evade Freedom of Information Act lawsuits by reminding judges that it's actually a privately owned business and not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. And as far as getting transparency, the owners of the Federal Reserve, they'll assassinate Trump before they allow any kind of audit to work. Looking at the numbers here today, Russia has come on out in Russia Today with an article saying that the U.S. is heading for bankruptcy. And they should know because they have been through this not all that long ago, where there was just way too much spending on the military and it bankrupted the Soviet Union. And by the way, if you were to take the U.S. budget and tax revenues and take out that gigantic war funding, the books would balance. We're in this multi-trillion-dollar debt because we're borrowing money to make war. And I guess the thinking must be that we're going to conquer all those other nations on planet Earth and we'll make them pay off our debts, if there's anybody still left alive with which to do it. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take another phone call. Eric in Kansas. Aloha, Eric. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Eric, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay. What's on your mind
I am
today?
here. I sent you an email concerning the derailment that happened in South Carolina.
Yes, you did. It was quite heavily detailed, in fact.
I am a former quality assurance auditor for a major railroad reconditioning facility.
Mm-hmm.
And CSX, BNSF, UP, and Norfolk Southern was among some of my company's largest customers. And let's just put it to you this way. The issues that is going on with American railroads is not only systematic, but it is institutional. Because if you saw some of the stuff that I had to look at as a quality auditor, it would absolutely frighten you.
I'm not surprised. I mean, based on, and by the way, I did publish your letter in the reader's letters section for that day. My understanding is the official story now is that because of a stuck or broken switcher, that one of the two trains was actually on the wrong track. It wasn't where it was supposed to be, and that's what led to a collision and derailment.
Actually, that CSX train was on the siding.
Yes.
And the Amtrak train, according to what I have heard so far, the Amtrak train was coming through an area where they was doing signal maintenance.
Okay.
And in that case, they are supposed to issue what is known as a speed restriction through that area.
Yes.
And apparently either they did, and the Amtrak personnel ignored it because they was late getting out of the station in Columbia, South Carolina on that morning, or the speed restriction from CSX did not get out.
Okay, well, obviously there's a lot more information that we need to have to be able to figure out exactly what headed on. And I don't mean to be brusque, but we're down to our last 25 minutes before our on-air guest comes, and I've got a huge amount of stuff to get through here. But thank you for the information, Eric, and I appreciate it. And I did publish your very detailed explanation at whatreallyhappened.com. So thank you very much for the phone call. And we're going to get on back here about the economic news here. There's a cool article over at fpif.org, and the headline just says it all. Write this down. Huge military budgets make us broke, not safe. And it's always been true. And again, look at what happened to the Soviet Union. They got spooked by Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, which cost a huge amount of money and didn't actually produce much of anything that really worked all that well. But there were a lot of rigged demos to make it look like the U.S. had come up with these amazing weapons, and the Soviet Union spent a bunch of money trying to keep up, and they bankrupted their country. And now, because the U.S. is out trying to conquer the rest of the world, and every place they invade they can't get out of, it becomes an immediate cash sink, we're headed to exactly the same situation. So let's talk about immigration here. Article over at Zero Hedge saying it's time to look at the real cost of illegal immigration in terms of money that is sent out of this country back to the home country for family. It's time to look at the job displacement of legal American citizens. It's time to look at how the illegal immigrants who are voting overwhelmingly Democratic, they're skewing the politics of our country. This is not good for our country at all. It's the globalist agenda. It's the New World Order. Now, over at the Washington Compost, they have an editorial basically saying that Trump's immigration plan could keep whites a U.S. majority for another 5 years. Apparently, the Washington Post has an agenda of making whites a minority here in the country that we pretty much built. And they're concerned that white people could dramatically influence our politics and culture, which seems to include everybody except white people. Okay. Macron is looking at a probable defeat. He's been out there championing the idea of integrating the European Union after Great Britain leaves. And apparently, the European Parliament is not expected to pass this one. Over in Germany, Angela Merkel finally reached a coalition deal with the SPD. So it looks like she's going to remain in power for a little while longer, but I wouldn't make any bets on her next election. The German people are very upset with their government. In fact, around the world, it's hard to find any country where the people are happy with their government right now, as everything heads to war and taking care of the money junkies. Apparently, according to the Alternative for Deutschland party in Germany, the German people are increasingly opposed to sanctions against Russia because it has backflashed and it has harmed them. All these sanctions on Russia cut Europe off from doing business with Russia, who was a major client for European produce, French wines, French produce. The sanctions are punishing the wrong people. And when a nation is hit with sanctions, who pays for it in that nation? The ordinary people. The rulers aren't going to give up anything. They're not going to give up their luxury and their lifestyle. Sanctions hurt the wrong people. And they've gone way, way too far. Now, you've probably all heard of, seen movies of Venice, Italy. and it's this city where there are very few roads. Everything is a canal. And they have the gondolas. We have all seen the gondolas, and the water taxis, and the vaporettos. And I've actually been to Venice myself, back when it was still pretty much considered part of Italy. But according to this article that I'm looking at here, right now, 90% of Venice is now occupied by immigrants. They're just flooding on in there. And that's what's going to happen to the rest of the world with this open border, New World Order agenda. Because we all have places that represent our cultural identity. For the Italians, it's places like Venice, Rome, Milan, Florence. And increasingly, we're being separated from these cultural anchors by the flood of refugees and illegal immigrants. It's like in Los Angeles. Claire and I lived in Los Angeles for a good part of our lives, and there are certain things there that we sort of anchor our memories to. The Academy of TV Arts and Sciences. We lived within walking distance of that. We used to walk the dog through all the statues out there. And now these neighborhoods are descending into violence, drug dealing, just like we're seeing these no-go zones over in Europe. The globalists are literally destroying the world that the rest of us built, generation after generation after generation after generation. Here in the United States, the liberal Democrats are basically bartering bits and pieces of this nation, which they do not own, to the illegal immigrants in exchange for votes. Now, apparently, over in Maryland, there was an illegal immigrant who was just urinating in public, and apparently a man came on up and said, "You really ought to do that in a restroom." And the illegal immigrant took out a box cutter and slashed him. Over in Denmark, apparently this Somali refugee demanded oral sex from this Danish man. And when the Danish man refused, he was beaten up. So there's your enrichment. Now, the other day we were talking about this story where these two lesbians had gone into this bakery, and they demanded the owner of the bakery make them a wedding cake for same-sex wedding. And the owner of the bakery said, "I can't do that because of my religious beliefs. However, I can refer you to another baker who would be very happy to do what you want." And the lesbians basically came back and said, "No, we don't want to go to the other bakery. You will make us the cake that we want." Which is where I feel they crossed the line. And so the state of California got involved and basically went to this baker and said, "You got to give these people the cake they want, or you got to stop baking completely. Just shut down your business," which is very coercive. Now, I remember when I was a kid, going into any place of business, there was always a little sign at the door, "We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." Well, fortunately, over in Kern County Superior Court, Judge David Lamp said that it's perfectly legitimate for this baker to refuse to make a cake. And his rationale was basically twofold. One, there was no discrimination because the cake didn't exist yet. The lesbians were trying to use the force of the state to get this baker to make something that hadn't existed before. And this cake didn't represent her own creativity. The judge took the position that being a baker who makes custom cakes, each cake is protected by First Amendment rights to freedom of speech. And making a cake that doesn't support her beliefs would be a violation of the First Amendment. So for right now, the judge is saying that if you have a bakery and you don't want to make a cake that's for same-sex wedding, or you don't want to make a cake that's got pornographic images on it, or you don't want to make a cake that says death to artificial sweeteners, you don't have to. Finally, some common sense going on out there More insanity from the politically correct. Apparently, 2 female associate professors of economics at the University of Michigan have published a paper basically saying economics is sexist and bigoted. I mean, we've already seen these other militant feminists saying mathematics is racist white male propaganda, philosophy is racist white male propaganda. Now they're saying economics is sexist and bigoted. And their entire claim rests on the idea that in economics textbooks, there'll be more pictures of men than of women. Now, the reality is that when those books were being published and photographers went on out to get pictures of economists, more men than women were working in economics. But that's not good enough for these professors. Betsy Stevenson and Hannah Zlotnick. Now, we talked about this before. I'm going to mention it again. You've got this whole transgenderism where the LGBTQ community is out there trying to blur the lines of gender so that they can basically say it's permissible to do anything we want, and you are wrong if you find it offensive. They're even trying to drag pedophilia in under this umbrella. And the nadir of this kind of nonsense is this 38-year-old pedophile who has been charged for molesting 3 underage girls over the 3 years. And he's basically come up with a new phrase. He's trans age. He's saying he's really a 9-year-old boy trapped in a 38-year-old body, and that this should excuse his behavior. And no, it shouldn't, because molesting underage girls is equally wrong whether you're 9 years old or 38 years old. But it does seem like part of the liberal political philosophy is to basically make it comfortable for people to do whatever they feel like doing, whether it's molesting small children or rioting when your candidate loses, or rioting again when the police shoot a black criminal who actually is a criminal. Doesn't matter whether they committed the crime or not. Riot. Over in Minnesota, kindergarten students in the Edina School District in Edina, Minnesota, are now being taught to study white privilege. White people are under attack in this country. That Washington Compost article just lays it right on out. Now, as you know, former presidential candidate Ben Carson is now the Secretary of HUD, Housing and Urban Development. And before I give you this next story, I want to remind everybody that during the presidential campaign, Ben Carson came on out with this idea that the pyramids of Egypt were actually for storing grain. Now, there's no history of this. There certainly isn't enough room inside those stone structures for that kind of purpose. There's no archaeological support for the idea. It is an idea that was put forth in the stage play Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, and called into question whether Carson could actually distinguish between reality and fantasy. So remembering that, apparently Ben Carson is now out there saying that the storyline of the movie The Purge could really happen. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, The Purge is a movie where there's this dystopian future and everything's kind of like the way it is right now. But for one day every year, the people are allowed to commit whatever crime they want, and there'll be no legal consequences. And so on that night, there's rapes and robberies and murders and all kinds of stuff. Supposedly, the population needs to blow off steam. And Ben Carson thinks that might actually happen. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I want to go back and talk about Falcon Heavy, which was a spectacular launch, spectacular landing of 2 of the 3 cores at Cape Kennedy. Elon Musk is now confirming that the middle booster of Falcon Heavy, the one that was supposed to land on the drone ship, exploded after it missed the drone ship and hit the ocean at 300 miles per hour. Apparently, only one of the core's 3 engines succeeded in relighting for the landing burn, and that's what caused it to crash. Now, at this point, I'm saying it's still a success. You lost one of the reusable cores, but that's not all that big a deal. That's why you're making the cores as cheaply as you can. Unfortunately, something else has come on up, and that is the fact that the Tesla, the car that served as the payload, has overshot its intended orbit out by Mars. And tracking shows it's actually going to reach all the way out to the asteroid belt, which is probably not going to be good for the paint job. And that is a failure. If the rocket doesn't go where you intend it to go, that is a mission failure. And during the early days, for example, the Ranger program, which was just trying to get close-up pictures of the moon, the first few of them just missed completely. One of them is thought to still be out there orbiting around one of the Lagrange points there. So this raises a kind of an interesting little idea. I couldn't help but thinking about this. Let's say that the U.S. government gets its world war, it goes nuclear, and we just blow up the entire surface of planet Earth. And so one of the few traces left of humanity will be this sports car with a mannequin in a spacesuit, a "Don't Panic" sign on the dashboard, and playing David Bowie music in an infinite loop. I would love to see the face of an alien archaeologist who's looking at this and trying to figure out what the heck happened here. NASA has just spotted 2 new potentially hazardous asteroids screaming toward Earth in the coming weeks, and they're going to miss us. Don't get upset. But it sort of underscores that for all the money that has been spent, it's still not a very good system. They're not detecting these asteroids until they're just 2 weeks out, where it's too late to do anything about it, and we still don't have anything that we can do about it, even when it happens. Apparently, a record blizzard slams Russia. Britain faces one of the coldest weeks of winter. Huge snow drifts, and meteorologists are saying it's only the beginning. The National Weather Service said weather conditions will sharply deteriorate across the eastern seaboard. Basically 6-hour freezing event. Too bad we don't have some of that human-caused global warming. Over in Flint, Michigan, their tap water just keeps getting worse and worse. Not only does it have the lead and toxic chemicals, now apparently it's contaminated with Legionnaire's disease. 12 people have died so far. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. When we come on back, we're going to have Don Wiskin of Extendovite to spend some time with. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And before we go to our guest, somebody just emailed me this episode from Star Trek Voyager, which actually begins with them finding a 1936 Ford pickup truck floating in space. So life imitates art, apparently. Okay, joining us on the air right now is Don Wiskin, who is, of course, the creator of Extendovite. And Don, thank you for spending time with us today.
Well, thank you for having me on, Michael.
Well, it's always a pleasure here, and of course, Claire and I use your product here, and I'm at the point right now where I'm ready to say I think it's having a positive impact, and my New Year's resolution for 2018 was to really focus on my health, so the Extendovite is definitely a big part of that. So once again, looking at the ingredients, it's all natural. And I think for a lot of people right now, there's a tremendous concern that synthetic chemicals being put forward by the medical industrial complex have side effects because they're brand new to the environment. Well, our biochemistry has never encountered them before, and they don't know what to do. And at the same time, I think more and more people are very concerned over this very obvious war, at least here in the United States of America, by the orthodoxy to try and shut down homeopathic or alternative medicines that are derived from nature. And of course, the big fight right now is kratom. So for those of our listeners who are not as familiar with your product as we are, why don't you give us again the rundown and review of what it is and what it does and how it helps your body?
Well, yes. It is 7 ingredients: garlic, cayenne, hawthorn, bilberry, ginkgo biloba, valerian, and milk thistle. And we have it in 2 forms. One is capsule, one is liquid. Now, in the liquid, it does have an alcohol base, but there is nothing other than those 7 herbs and the alcohol in the liquid. And in the capsules, it is strictly the herbs inside of a capsule. I just had some new pictures done of our product, and at our website at heartdrop.com, there's actually a pile of the herbs out of out of a few of the capsules actually. And if you blow that up, you can actually see all of the red in there from the cayenne and the other herbs. It, the nice brown texture to it. There is no fillers in there whatsoever, and we're licensed by Health Canada. This is something that the United States is looking at, been looking at for the last, we started in around 2000 coming up with the NPN, the natural product number, and we have that for both the capsules and the liquid. But our homeopathic medicines took a bit of a hit during that time as well, unless they could pass the monograms and get an NPN. As of December 1st, 2013, if you didn't have an NPN, you could not manufacture your product in Canada, and we're still in Canada manufacturing the Extendivite.
Okay, well, I think this relates into what I'm saying about there does seem to be a regulatory war going on to basically eliminate the competition for the corporatized medical industrial complex. And one good example here, as you know, there's a natural occurring medication out there called kratom, and it's still available. It's still legal. It's an analgesic. In high doses, it's unfortunately also a recreational drug, and I think that's why the FDA feels they're justified in coming down on it. But the FDA is trying to declare it as an opiate and sort of ride the concern over the opiate crisis in the United States. And their justification is simply saying that kratom fits into the opiate receptors in the cells. Well, that really doesn't make it an opiate. There are other chemicals like naloxone that fits into that receptor and is used to treat opiate addiction. But we're seeing all kinds of stuff like this where, and again, it's all driven by money. They don't want us to have medications we can grow in our own yard. They don't want people like you coming up with medications that might actually work because the whole medical industrial complex needs us to be chronically ill to make their money.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Half of the people over 65 in England take at least 5 different pills a day. And in 1990, that number was 12%. Today, it's over 47%. So, yes, drug companies really don't want anything that's going to help somebody help themselves.
I think here in the United States, once you get caught on that prescription medication treadmill, the average number of bottles in people's medicine chests is 12 here in the United States.
Yeah, and that's a little ridiculous. I mean, I've been in this business for 18 years now, and over this time, I've talked to a lot of people, and we hear from seniors all the time that they believe their spouse passed away because they were just taking way too many prescription drugs, and that's the only thing that they could explain what happened to them. And I can see that too. I mean, what you just said, 12 pills a day. I mean, imagine what it feels like. I took Zolcor, which is a statin drug. I took it once, and I was so sick, I couldn't believe how sick I was. And, I just turned around and said, I can't take this. But my cousin said to me, he says, oh, you get used to it. And I said, why would you want to get used to something that makes you feel this sick?
Well, if you're feeling that sick, it's your body is telling you an important message and you need to pay attention to it. Now, of course, they're coming to understand statins don't really work the way the pharmaceutical companies say it's supposed to. And in fact, it can actually contribute to stroke and death. And I think that's what we lost my youngest brother to. That he'd gone on a health kick and he'd gone to the doctor and the doctor said, oh, you got to be on statins. And then 3 months later, he had a stroke that permanently disabled him. And 3 months after that, he had a heart attack. And he was fine up until he started taking the medication. And we hear all these horror stories of people who are given these vaccines and they come down very, very ill, or they suffer mental effects leading to suicide or violent crime. I think medical mistake was the reason for both my parents' death. Doctors said, chance to make more money here. I still think that Neil Armstrong fell victim to a doctor who just wanted to have bragging rights that he'd operated on Neil Armstrong. And we see these stories all along about doctors who are caught committing financial fraud. And I know we're all brainwashed by the movie and TV industry to trust certain segments of our society as being above reproach. The clergy, medical people, the police, and yet real experience shows that no, they are just as fallible and flawed as the rest of us, and we have to be very, very careful.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. My dad passed away from, well, I say complications of bypass, but what actually happened is they gave him tainted blood. And when he came home from the hospital, he was rubbing his arms, he felt itchy inside of his body. And he said to my sister, he says, I think they gave me the wrong blood. 2 years later, they diagnosed him with a rare form of blood cancer, and they gave him a month to live, and he lived a month.
Boy, they do make mistakes.
Well, they do. They do, even here in Canada, where we have, supposedly good health care, but sometimes we have to go to the States and spend money to get the real health care.
Well, that's funny because I know a lot of people who think that you have to go up to Canada to get decent health care. The health care in this country is the most expensive in the world, but it's something like 33rd in quality. If you're going to spend the money to travel, go down to Cuba. It's the same quality medical care that you're going to get here in the U.S., and it's much, much cheaper. But the problem is, again, because it is here in the United States, it's all about making money. And that goes back to Richard Nixon, who signed the Health Maintenance Organization bill as a gift to his friends over at Kaiser Permanente. And it basically changed medical practice from being a service that charged a reasonable fee to just being a for-profit racket. And that's when the prices really started going up. And because profit is the bottom line, staffing gets cut, more and more workload is dumped on the people who haven't lost their jobs, and that's what leads to this culture of mistakes. And then you have all the regulatory compliance that is required by Obamacare, not to mention the other health insurance companies. And these days, doctors are spending as much time filling out forms as they do seeing actual patients, and that's why the care and attentiveness has gone into a decline. But we've kind of wandered off topic here a little bit. Again, what is Extendivite good for?
Extendivite is good for many, many things. Mostly it has to do with circulation, cleaning out the toxins, getting the metal out of your liver, and letting your body repair itself, because your body is very intelligent. It can actually heal itself. It just needs the right food and nutrients that we're not getting in our industrialized diet, because industrialized farming has just ruined the food that we're eating. Yes. And so we're not getting the nutrients.
Well, it's not just the industrialized farming, it's the fact that because of things like the Gulf oil disaster and Fukushima and San Onofre, we've toxified so much of the biosphere, there literally isn't enough safe, healthy, organic food for the world's population. And that's why governments in many countries, including here in the U.S., they're allowing the companies that manufacture food products to use more fillers. They get away from it because they'll use the word like beef. It isn't cow. It is something called beef that has some cow in it, but also other stuff like literally sawdust is approved as a filler for ground beef. So when they're out there saying it's 100% beef, what they really are saying is it's 100% of this concoction we put together to make a fast buck. Same thing with tuna. When you go into the store and you see tuna in a can, you could be forgiven for thinking you're going to find tuna fish inside the can. No, it's any one of 17 different species of fish are allowed to be put in cans labeled tuna. Same thing with honey. You go to a store and the bottle says honey. You pick it up thinking you're getting something that comes out of the rear end of a bee. And no, in many cases, it's just sugar water with coloring and thickening. And so you need to be very careful about your food, just as you need to be very, very careful about your medications. And I think a lot of people are going back to trying to get raw food right out of the ground, right out of the animal, and cook their own at home. It's a lot more work, but you know what you're getting. Claire's that attitude. And a lot of people are trying to go back to these older medical treatments that were known to have worked through the centuries because the current medical industrial complex has become very untrustworthy. It's dominated by profitability. And one of the stories that we ran on our website today was basically that these drug trial protocols have been exposed for literally pre-selecting a pool of test patients that they know won't get sick from the adverse effects of the drug being tested. So they'll have a drug trial that says these people got well, none of them got sick, and it goes out into the public, and then all of a sudden people are being harmed by it. So it's not trustworthy.
No, it is getting very difficult. I mean, I remember before my heart attack 20 years ago, going on 21 now, I trusted the government to ensure that the food that I ate was safe. I mean, I figured those burger joints on the corner or the chicken places were all, safe to eat. But I soon found out that you can't eat those foods on a regular basis. They're not healthy for you, and you really need to go back to the vegetable section of the grocery store. That's about the safest place to buy food.
Well, unfortunately, that's not even true here in the United States anymore, because they're spraying the produce with glyphosate not only when it is being grown in the farm fields, but they've discovered that glyphosate acts as a preservative. And so they'll spray all the produce with it, not just the Roundup Ready produce, so that it will last longer in the supermarket, look fresher, and there'll be less loss and more profit. And so, again, that stuff soaks into the vegetables, and it's there, and people are eating it, and the World Health Organization has declared it a probable human carcinogen. And all the management at Monsanto can think about is how to hide that from the consumer, how to hide the fact that they're eating GMO from the consumer, because it's all about making the money. And people need to develop a very healthy skepticism of everything that is in that supermarket, including the produce section. Claire and I, we're very lucky. We have local farmers markets from people who live here on the island, they grow here on the island, and they understand they can't do anything funny or they'll lose their clientele, because it's a very educated clientele. They're coming on in looking for something that's grown here locally that hasn't had a lot of chemicals thrown on it. But we're getting that corporate invasion. Apparently there's a what's that one Yahoo Amazon just acquired Whole Foods. We're getting a Whole Foods store in the neighborhood.
Whole Foods, yes.
And already we're hearing that ever since Whole Foods was acquired by Amazon, they're moving away from the non-GMO, they're moving away from the organic, and Whole Foods, apparently Amazon is using its purchasing clout to get more conventional products in there, and apparently the people working at these stores are not at all happy about that. So let's get back to heart and circulation here, because obviously that is very important, especially as you start getting older or if you have a very sedentary lifestyle. You need to keep those veins and arteries open and plaque-free so that you're getting adequate blood to all the parts of your body, especially your brain. And as I said a little bit earlier in the show, after years of selling statins that were supposed to prevent arterial plaque, they found out what was actually happening is the statins were leading the arterial plaque to break off the walls of the blood vessels in very large chunks. which could then get stuck in very important places, like the vessels that feed the heart or certain vessels in the brain. But they made money with it, and they were all happy, and they went on home. And as far as I know, they're still being offered for prescription out there.
Yes, they are. But, in my case, I had a massive heart attack because I had too much plaque building up in my arteries. But since then, I've learned that the reason for the plaque buildup is really the cholesterol is just a Band-Aid. The damage happens in the artery.
Yes.
The cholesterol comes along to put a Band-Aid on it until the body can repair the damage, but we're not getting the right nutrients. That's where the Extendivite and these 7 herbs comes in to help repair that damage, releasing that cholesterol back into the bloodstream for the liver, which created it, to dispose of it. Because cholesterol is so important, your liver creates 1,500 milligrams a day, even if you don't eat any cholesterol-producing foods. So, they're looking at trying to repair people's health from the wrong angle. And the angle really should be getting back to basic, getting back to the herbs that we've used for thousands and thousands of years, before our topsoil became eroded of all of its nutrients and we're eating empty foods.
You're absolutely right. Most of the farmland around the entire world has been depleted of key minerals. And there are actually companies now that are trying to deal with this by literally open pit mining down to older soil that still has the necessary minerals, and then they sell it as a topping on the farm fields. Here in the United States, the claim is made that just putting fertilizer on the fields will replace all the minerals. That's not necessarily true. It'll certainly put the stuff that makes the plants grow a little bit better, but are the plants healthier for us to eat? That's an issue that's not really looked at. And again, on top of that, we have that GMO problem.
Well, I've talked to a few natural farmers, and one of the things that they say is for yourself, for growing for your own consumption, use magnesium and Epsom salts in the soil. Mix it up with your water and water the plants with it, and you'll see that they get healthier and they look better and they taste better. So you get much better quality just by adding magnesium and Epsom salts, whereas your body needs these 7 herbs. These herbs have been proven over our history to do the job that we wanted to do. I mean, Alzheimer is a big problem nowadays, but
yes,
could ginkgo biloba possibly help with that? I don't know, but it seems to be helping a lot of people with their memories, but I don't know what it can do. But, they've discovered that if they use a certain frequency, they can allow the plaque that's in the brain to drip out through the blood-brain barrier using that frequency to open that valve up.
All right. Well, listen, we need to take a 3-minute break for commercials. We'll be back here with Don Wiskin and Extendivite after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Don Wiskin of Extendivite. And Don, I'm already getting emails from people saying that they're glad you're not the advertiser I lost. And I just actually got a text message on my cell phone from somebody saying they take Extendivite and they love it as well. So there's a lot of positive feedback coming on in. Now, I know you have to take off here at the bottom of the hour, so I'm just going to turn the microphone over to you for you to share with our listeners what's the latest development, where's Extendivite going, just whatever you want to say. And please remember to include the URL of your website where they can get more information and order the product.
Well, thank you again, Michael. Well, first of all, this is February, and February is Heart Month, and we've been involved in this business for 18 years now, and we have a sale every February. We give a fair discount because it is Heart Month. It's our customer appreciation sale. It runs from the 1st of February through to the 28th. We have a lot of customers who just buy once a year, and they come in and pick up on the sale right now. The product has been doing very, very well by a lot of people. It's flu season. It's a good time to be taking it. I know you had a cold a little while ago, Michael, but I've been taking it for quite some time, and I woke up last week with a sore throat, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm catching one of those colds. Well, before the day was out, the sore throat was gone, no sniffles, no sneezing, no coughs. And I really felt sorry for you when you were suffering with that, the down under flu that was going out there
Aussie
just a
flu
while
here.
ago.
Well, listen, it didn't, Claire and I, of course, take your product. It didn't hit us all that hard when you consider that this flu has killed 45,000 Americans. So this is a serious illness, but it didn't hit us all that hard. The main problem was, of course, Claire injuring her back, but she's over that now as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. I appreciate that input. I mean, I feel better knowing that you were on the air. You only took 1 or 2 days off. So I felt that, it wasn't as bad as some people, because some people were sick for a week to 10 days. It was pretty bad. But, it just comes back down to the Extendivite helps with angina pain, improving oxygen and blood flow to the heart and brain, normalizing cholesterol, normalizing blood pressure, warming up your cold hands and feet, improving the circulation, and boosting your natural immune system. And you can find more information at heartdrop.com. That's HEARTDROP.com. There's a link on what really happened. If you scroll down on the right side, you can get to our website from there. It's been a wonderful, wonderful 18 years dealing with the people and seeing people live longer, live healthier, and get back to what they're doing. Well, and supplementation is important as well.
I want to add something here because I'm listening to you, and you're obviously enthusiastic about your product itself. You're proud of it, and you're proud of what it does to help people, and that does stand as a sharp contrast to the attitude that we get from our corporatized medical industrial complex, where the attitude is, come on in, we don't care if you live or die, we charge you the same amount of money anyway. And it does harken back to a time where the desire for wealth was balanced with other considerations, pride of craftsmanship, concern for your community and everything. So I really like hearing you talk that way. We've got about another minute left. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Other than Extendivite's available through Amazon.com or HeartDrop.com, our toll-free number, as you probably heard on our commercials, 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822. And visit HeartDrop.com. This is our February month sale. Buy a year's worth if you want it. This is the time to save the money. I know we have a lot of customers that can't afford to save the money, so they buy what they can at this time, and then they come back during the rest of the year. Other than that, Michael, I'm happy.
Well, okay. Well, thank you very much for spending time with us today. It's always a pleasure. And again, Claire and I are using your product, and again, because we've changed so many other issues in our lifestyle, I don't have a scientific basis for saying it's helping. It's just a gut feeling. That it really is, and I intend to go on using your product.
Well, I hope you do, because you'll be here for a long time to help share the message of all of the corruption that's going on in the world and making it clear and evident to your listeners.
Well, that's certainly the reason we keep doing what we're doing. So thank you very much for spending time with us today. And once again, that was Don Wiskin of Extendivite. And you can get more information about the product at heartdrop.com. which you can also reach through the little ad block that's on the right side of my page. And again, it's all natural. There's no synthetic chemicals, and the liquid version has a little alcohol, but there's nothing in there that's harmful. I've got a book on herbal medicines. I've looked all of these up there. They've been used for hundreds and hundreds of years for exactly what Don Wiskin is using them for. And they work. Certainly work far better than the synthetic, patentable, market monopoly drugs that we get out of the medical industrial complex. All righty, well, we're going to take another commercial break here. We've got a caller waiting on the line when we come right back, and stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call from James in Ohio. James, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind today? James, are you there? Did we lose James? I guess we must have. All right. getting on back to the news, story just now breaking, being reported in Russia Today. The U.S. forces in Syria have started. Okay, is James there? I guess he was having trouble, technical issues. There's no James. All right, let me get back to this. U.S. forces have just launched what they're describing as defensive airstrikes against the Syrian forces. I told you they weren't going to let this go. And the rationale is that the Syrian government has carried out attacks against the headquarters of the Syrian Democratic Forces, who are the opposition group supported by the United States. So the U.S. is now launching attacks against the Syrian forces, and basically it's justifying it, saying that the U.S. has a non-negotiable right to act in self-defense because we're standing basically on somebody else's country. That's it. Not since Hitler's claims about the Sudetenland has there been such a steaming pile of bovine excrement to justify naked aggression, because that's exactly what this is. The U.S. does not want to give up in Syria. They basically have just started attacking the Syrian government forces while still maintaining that they're there to get rid of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So it looks like Syria is flaring up to something really ugly. All right, let's get on back here to science and health issues. Let me clear my little text window here. As you know, a lot of people are very critical of fracking. It's polluted a lot of the country while failing to produce the volume of oil and gas that was promised. And it's turning out to be a serious health hazard. We talk about this a little bit in the video I made for a convention called What Are They Thinking? And the idea was the fracking company said, well, we're going to drill down real deep underground. We're going to crack the rock. We're going to extract the oil and gas. And then we'll pull the drill out. And, of course, all that highly toxic fracking fluid and various industrial waste and everything will stay down there in the ground out of reach. Of course, it doesn't work that way, because when you frack the rocks, you have cracked them and opened up pathways, and the chemicals seep to the surface. Methane bubbles to the surface, killing fish in ponds, streams, and lakes. And we know that some of those chemicals are carcinogenic. And so it comes as no surprise to see this article in the Daily Mail, where there is now a study, research saying there is a link between fracking and breast cancer. And they're saying that some of these chemicals used in high-pressure oil and gas fracturing cause uncontrolled cell division, which is exactly what a cancer is. The cells just multiply, create a tumor. Okay, it looks like James in Ohio is back. James, welcome back to the show. What is on your mind today?
I actually know quite a bit about things like the ingredients in extendivite. First of all, garlic is a extremely potent microbicide, whether it's bacteria, fungi, or what they call cell wall deficient organisms, or mycoplasma, which are actually a big problem. Yeah, it pretty much kills any kind of a microbe. But it won't kill the good bacteria in your gut, because by the time it reaches the large intestine, it's been metabolized. Valerian, I've heard you mention something about benzodiazepines. It actually doesn't resemble that in a molecular sense at all. It's simple alcohol, but it does bind to the same receptor, but a different subunit, and therefore it has a calming action. Ginkgo biloba was a subject of intense interest in the nootropic or cognitive enhancing drug community, and it has a action like theanine, which is extracted from green tea. It depresses NMDA receptor activity, and NMDA receptors are glutamate receptors. Their overactivity is what makes aspartame toxic.
Okay. Yes.
Substances, well, substances that make glutamate receptors overactive are called excitotoxins, and therefore, since ginkgo biloba depresses that activity, it has a very good effect on the brain. Now, the ginkgo and some of the various other components, what I recall is that they have anti-inflammatory effects through some exotic pathways that I'm not that well versed on, but inflammation is a huge mechanism for the damage that disease and aging do. So, yeah, it sounds like a really good combination pill. Now, as far as kratom, I can tell you I'm familiar with the law. I've designed some rec drugs. I was involved when designer drugs became an internet thing. And the thing is, if it acts on opiate receptors, it actually does make it an opiate. What you're probably thinking of is you're probably equating an opiate with what they call a morphinan skeleton, which means a molecule that looks like morphine or codeine. But there are lots of drugs that look nothing like them, but they act on opiate receptors, and they're controlled substances. And I hate to agree with the DEA, but they're right on this one.
Okay.
I've heard that it is addictive, and it's a bummer to withdraw from.
I had heard that as
kratom.
well, and my own interest in the kratom was as a pain reliever for Claire, because we weren't getting anything from the Minute Clinic or the urgent care, and she could not get an appointment with her regular care provider until May, and she was in serious, serious pain. Fortunately, about the time the kratom showed up, she was getting out of this, and so she never even took it. We're probably going to put it in our emergency kit for after the apocalypse. What's really interesting, though, is if you go back and you look at folklore, you will find references to things being magical. Garlic is a good example. People back then, even the educated people, they didn't know how these things work. They didn't know about molecules. They didn't know about complex chemistries, but they just observed that people who were taking or using certain things, good things would happen. And they would just say, we don't know how, it just does, and it's magic, and the folklore took off from that. Garlic is known as a blood purifier, and of course, from that it went on to think, oh, it'll scare away the vampires. One of the reasons that silver is such a popular gift for newlyweds is during the Great Plagues in Europe, it was noticed that royalty eating off of gold plates and utensils was coming down with the plague just as often as the peasantry who were eating off of wood utensils. But the mid-level nobility who were using silverware and silver goblets, they weren't getting as sick, anywhere near as sick. Today we know, of course, about nanosilver being bacterial. They didn't know it back then. They just understood there was something about silver that made it nice to have around, especially if you live near the werewolves. And that's why the traditional wedding gift for a newly married couple is a set of silver, solid silver, not plate, solid silver goblets, which they will then drink to each other's health. That's where this all comes from. So you can actually find a lot of leads about what's going on. Now, before I let you talk here again, James, I want to explain. If you're hearing what sounds like a loud rumbling in the background, we're under a big thunderstorm right now, and hopefully we'll be able to finish the show.
I don't.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm not leaning my head out the window to put the microphone up in the sky, so. But I'm certainly hearing it here. But then this is a sportscaster's headset, and it apparently does work at excluding outside noises. So anything else, James?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Your guest mentioned something very important, the magnesium. There's an article from Nexus magazine called Magnesium for Health or Magnesium Chloride for Health and Rejuvenation. It's available as a free PDF, and everybody should read it. One big thing is that the Japanese, they eat a lot of seaweed and seafood, therefore they get their magnesium and their other trace elements, but especially magnesium. And they smoke more than us, but they seem to not get cancer from it. Americans are typically very magnesium deficient, and magnesium chloride will absorb right through the skin. I've seen, like a miracle drug, you can spray the solution on, and it's a fraction of seawater, and it's sold as ice melting salt, so it's really cheap. It's also used in marine aquariums, so you can get it in 1, 5, 10,
yes, you
50-pound bags, whatever.
I want to back up here. I want to back up here to the smoking issue, because as it turns out, American cigarettes do cause cancer, but it's not the tobacco. The American tobacco companies, in order to have the maximum crop, they will fertilize the tobacco plants with mined mineral fertilizer, which is okay, except that the mined mineral fertilizer is slightly radioactive, usually from polonium-210.
Yeah.
And
well, also they did a lot of high airburst atomic tests over tobacco fields. So the fallout.
Where did that happen?
I read it somewhere that I didn't follow up, and I can't investigate everything, but I read somewhere that they did some high airburst atomic tests over tobacco country, and therefore the fallout is constantly generating polonium, and you can find some polonium in tobacco. So that would explain the cancer. But also, unfortunately, what happens when you burn tobacco, when you pyrolyze it, you get a chemical called nicotine N oxide, and nicotine N oxide is sold in order to induce cancer in mammals because it does so with great reliability, just like other N oxides. They're called nitroso compounds. So, but I'm a 2-pack-a-day smoker, and I'm the only one in my family that hasn't had heart surgery. I do.
Sometimes it works like that. My maternal grandfather smoked cigars and drank whiskey right up to the day he died, and he was somewhere right around 100 years old when that happened. But getting on back to the way tobacco is grown, first of all, there is the mined mineral fertilizer, which is a source of polonium without needing to set off an atomic bomb over the tobacco plantation. And through a process called bioaccumulation, tobacco plants will suck up that radioactive material into the leaves. And when you do a radioactive cleanup, like they're trying to do at Fukushima, one of the things you do is you plant a lot of greenery that will take the radiation out of the soil. They did this all around Chernobyl, and then you find a way to dispose of the green plants because they have drawn most of the radioactive contamination out of the ground.
Mine's mineral fertilizer, just off the top of my head, it sounds like it might have a lot of heavy metals in it too, like mine tailings. You know,
it very much could have that. And of course, for American cigarettes, there are all the chemicals that are added to it to keep the tobacco burning, to increase the nicotine delivery. One of the early Russell Crowe movies was called The Insider, and it's based on a true story about when it first came on out, that cigarette companies were intentionally making cigarettes as addictive as possible. At the same time, they were out there testifying before Congress that no, cigarettes are not addictive. And if you haven't seen that movie, it's a very good one. Russell Crowe did an excellent job in it. It's well worth seeing that. Anyway, listen, James, we're coming up here to the end of the show, and I want to get a couple of stories out there. So thank you very much for the information. We're going to let you go here. Now, over in Taiwan, they've had a second major earthquake, 6.4. This one was very shallow. And because it's shallow, people at the hypocenter, which is the surface of the ground above the epicenter, huge amounts of damage. Apparently some buildings are literally on the verge of falling over. I saw some photographs where they're literally, they've put these huge wooden beams, tree trunks, against these buildings, trying to keep them from collapsing until they can be searched for survivors. So Ring of Fire is definitely ringing these days. Now, here's something interesting. There was a woman who was chatting with her nephew in Facebook Messenger, and all of a sudden the TV screen switches images, and she sees some total stranger apparently eavesdropping on the conversation. And probably, again, more hacking, more spying. Another phone call here. Sherry in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Yeah, I want to say something to Tom if he's still listening. You know, I can get very reactionary about stuff like my brokerage and things that have, like people when they scam me, and I have to say, whether I have a right to or not, I like Tom's unique personality and his interaction with you because it was entertaining. And my brain can't retain times, places much, and names and faces. I pretty much talk about what I feel. So I didn't understand what he was talking about anyway. So I found him entertaining, and I hope he gives some thought to asking questions. It's a lot healthier than getting angry, because I've long learned that not to let anger weigh on me and waste my time beyond its time. I mean, you have to have some anger. It's good for your body to let some of that out. But beyond its time, it just weighs on you and can bring you down. So I hope he'll ask more questions in the future to confirm his feelings.
Sherry, I'm sorry, he's banned. And
I know.
My problems with Tom go back. My problems with Tom go back a long, long way. Where he's calling on in and he's talking as fast as he can. He's just trying to get his point of view out here on the airwaves, and he's clearly coming from a position of not really understanding what he's talking about. And he even admitted that today. That he called in yesterday, not really knowing the reality. He was just there to spout hate against Iran that was completely and wholly unjustified. And, I'm sorry. I don't like to ban people, but every once in a while, I do feel that it is absolutely necessary. Now, Sherry, we're going to have to take another commercial break here. Don't hang up, because I know you want to talk about one other subject besides Tom. And so we'll come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today. And we're still talking with Sherry in Texas. And, Sherry, you had one other subject you wanted to get on to.
Well, it's something regarding what Hillary said about global warming. I don't think women will be chopping wood in a global warming climate change type scenario. I think men will have to do double duty on the snowplow for their homes and likely for their neighbors, like my friend that lives in a very cold climate, and God bless them for that, because they need to get their mail and they need to get food delivered, and this is what it'll probably be.
Oh, yeah. Everybody works together to get things done here, and this idea that Hillary's putting on out there that climate change is somehow automatically going to mean that the men are going to kick back and either just do what they were doing before or do even less and drop the burden on the women. And in the real world, there are relationships where one or the other of the partners is doing a majority of the work, and the reasons can simply be psychological comfort reasons. It can be that one of them is simply stronger. I mean, that's basically the situation here, especially when Claire was dealing with her back injury. I basically just took on everything, and because that's what you do. But the idea of trying to link this to climate change and then use it to demonize men, you just have to wonder, what is Hillary thinking? And I think what's going on is she's just trying to keep her face out there in public, because I think she's going to run again in 2020 if she's still alive and not in prison.
Right. Well, yeah. I think maybe so. Also, I agree with you, what you're saying about marriage. It has to be commensurate or equal in measure, or there's going to be an imbalance and there's going to be problems.
You're absolutely right. When you get into a pattern where one partner is always taking and the other one's always giving, sooner or later, the giving one gets tired of it. That was a big part of what destroyed my first marriage. Was that I worked really hard to try and keep the marriage going, and the whole time my spouse at that time was just taking and no desire or expectation of balance. And that's why when I got together with Claire, I said, we're going to lay down some rules. And that is equal share of the work, equal share of the benefits. It was actually a little hard, because Claire came into the relationship from her first marriage wanting to do everything for me. And I said, it would be so easy for me to sit back and let you do that, and I know it would not last. So
that's
equal turns on everything. We've been together for 25 years. And the marriage is wonderful. I love her greatly, and I think we have a better marriage than most people that we know.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure. Well, I feel like you do. Well, yeah. That's what it takes.
Definitely.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you. Okay.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end of the program, so Sherry, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. And apparently there's some new stuff about to break about what was going on during the campaign. Apparently the spying extended way beyond Trump. It was just completely out of control. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here. And actually, I'm just going to stay indoors because we're into some heavy weather. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Meanwhile, please stay tuned to John Stedmiller's program. I'm sure he's got a lot of stuff to share with you. And again, I ask you, take all this information about the FISA memo, the Grassley memo, and just get it on out there because the corporate media is trying to make this go away. We can't let them bury this story. It's up to the Rivero's Rangers. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.